Hello, NaNoWriMo. I am Grant Faulkner, Executive Director of National Novel Writing Month, and I'm super excited today because we've got this wonderful webcast, which is we're going to talk about the journey of a novel, of a book, literally from word one to the shelves of your local bookstore. So it's going to be super exciting. We're going to cover it all. And I think it's going to be really wonderful because we're partnering with our sponsor, Sisters in Crime, on this. And they're a wonderful, wonderful organization. I always think that they embody so much of the spirit of NaNoWriMo in so many different ways. And if you don't know them, their whole mission is to elevate underserved voices. And they were founded in 1986. With the charter to promote the advancement, recognition, and professional development of women crime writers. And one thing I admire about them is, just like NaNoWriMo, they have this wonderful community of writers. I think they have, I know thousands of writers are involved. They have 60 chapters across the United States. So check out and see if there's a chapter near you. And they also, they provide education like this webcast today and newsletters and other things. But one thing to think about right now is that they sponsored NaNoWriMo this year with a special offer of 20% off of Sisters in Crime membership. And so you can go to the NaNoWriMo website to the writers resources and check out our special offers in general. But all you have to do is go to Sisters in Crime and type in code NaNo21 by February 1st to join. And I think you're going to want to join after today's webcast because we've got a lot of great things happening. And the thing I like about this webcast is that you're hearing from so many different perspectives. And what I've learned about publishing is, well, I always joke, you have to go through publishing a book once just to learn what it's about. But that's kind of unfortunate because you really want to learn a lot of what it's all about so that you can open the doors to your second book, so that you can be successful enough with your first book to publish more. And so that's we're going to talk about today from the perspective of authors, agents, editors. There's going to be a lot of great stuff happening. So I want to introduce, well, before I introduce Vanessa, everyone, we want to answer your questions about this as well. So for those of you watching, please put your questions in the YouTube chat, and our producer, Catherine, will pass them along to us, and we'll try to answer all the questions. But we've got also robust panel discussions planned with Vanessa Lilli, who is the author of Little Voices. You'll see the cover right over her shoulder. And just before we were coming on, Vanessa was telling me about how she wrote that during NaNoWriMo, and NaNoWriMo really helped her with her creative process and her writing discipline in order to get that done. So we hope that works for you as well. And Vanessa, you just released For the Best last fall, is that right?
That's right, just came out. And with Thomas and Mercer as well. So I'll be able to kind of talk a little bit about a two book deal contract, which was new to me when I signed, but exciting all the same. So definitely a lot of opportunities to talk from people who kind of are just now going through a lot of this early stage parts of a writer's career.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to everyone for joining us. I'm going to sit back and listen and hand it over to you, Vanessa. But thanks so much. I might even pop in with a couple questions myself.
Oh, I love that, Grant. Thank you. And thank you. NaNoWriMo is such an awesome partner. I'm on the National Board of Sisters in Crime, and we were so happy to join the NaNoWriMo this year as a sponsor because we're really about lifting up voices of those women in the crime fiction community. And very particularly, we want to make sure we reach out to young adult, middle grade. It isn't just a cozy mystery. Sisters in Crime is really about just providing the support and community that's needed for a writer's career. And so definitely, check us out, especially if you're new to us. We're going to be talking a lot about Sisters in Crime. But I did want to just mention quickly that there are two awards that might apply to you that you could think about. The first one is a brand new award that we just launched. We'll put a link in the notes, and it's that Sisters in Crime's Pride Award, and it's for emerging LGBTQIA+ writers of crime fiction. And it's a $2,000 grant that just goes towards whatever you need in your writing life. So please consider applying for that. It's our first ever having it. We've got 3 fantastic judges, and it's going to be a great contest. And the second contest to consider, which we'll hear from Mia, who won this award, is the Eleanor Taylor Bland Crime Fiction Writers of Color Award. And this is an annual, again, $2,000 to an emerging writer of color. And so the only qualification is just a writer of color and, something within crime fiction, middle grade, fiction, nonfiction, we're very, very open. And the important thing is just providing support because we really need your voices. Great. And with that said, let's jump into this fantastic panel. So I'm going to, we're going to start out in part one. This is in 3 parts. So again, if you have a question, definitely kind of think about it in terms of each panel, each section. So if we're talking about something that you want, just throw the question in there because we're going to kind of keep it contained to our different sections. So the first session is about from NaNo to idea, to agent, to editor, to publisher. Again, that is about the journey of the book. And we have the journey right here, starting with one of my favorite authors and people, Kellye Garrett, who, and then on to her agent, Richter, and then her fantastic editor, Terri Bischoff. And sorry, my 6-year-old is very interested in what I'm doing. So I'm going to start, and I'll just do an intro and then a question. So I'll start with Kellye. And so Kellye wrote this, and if you don't have it, please, you need this book immediately. Kellye Garrett's Hollywood Homicide, which is about a semi-famous, mega broke Black actress. It won the Anthony, the Agatha, the Lefty, the Ippy. It won it all. She is the most phenomenal mystery with the most gorgeous cover. And it's one of BookBub's top 100 crime novels of all time. She's also on the Sisters in Crime National Board and as a co-founder of Crime Writers of Color. Big shout out to that organization. Definitely check that out. Their podcast, everything, they are there to support writers of color and do such a great job with it. And her next project is an Own Voices, domestic suspense novel, which I've read a little bit of it, and it's fantastic, about a woman looking into the overdose death of a one-time reality TV star that's her sister found within blocks of her house. So that is Kellye. More at Kellye, Kellye, Garrett.com. Kellye, I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me in that lovely intro. I feel very fancy.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. So I obviously love Hollywood Homicide, and but I didn't realize it was a NaNo book until we started talking about this panel. And I wonder if maybe you sort of forgot too.
It was because you know why it was a NaNo book in 2011, and the book came out in 2017. So it was a 6-year journey to be an overnight success. So
that's right. That's how that goes usually. So you had the idea for Hollywood Homicide in 2010, and then you finally started it for there's August NaNo 2011. Yes. So kind of tell us about what you took from that experience. How did that kind of you wrote it, which is a big deal, and then you had to go to the next big step of looking to get an agent. So tell us about that process for you.
So I have wanted to write a book since I was 5 years old, and I was always really scared. And so it took me to be like mid-30s and not to have a job and just to be completely lost to finally be brave enough to write a book. And so that happened in 2010. And I had the idea, and of course I still was not brave enough to write a book. So finally in 2011, I was like, oh, what is this NaNo thing? And I saw it and I'm like, oh, what a great idea. And I actually had a friend who was going to do it too. So we both decided to do it. And as you know, for NaNo, you're supposed to, the idea is to do 50,000 words. I only did 32,000 words, which I guess technically makes me a NaNo not a winner, but it was still 32,000 words. I've never written a book before, and I had 32,000 words of a book finally after 30 years in a month, thanks to NaNo. And so the great thing I think about NaNo is that it just puts you in I always heard it takes 21 days to start a habit. And so if you look at it like that, you have 30 days or 31 days in November. And so you're getting into the habit of writing every day. And so even though I did not get 50,000 words, I was getting to the habit of writing every day. And so I don't think I still wrote every day, but by that next summer, I had a first draft, and first drafts always stink. I call it a vomit draft. And I kept revising it with some friends in a writer's group until it was done, started querying it, was getting like requests, but rejections. And then I found an online mentoring program called Pitch Wars, which is pitchwars.org. And what they do is they take an established author or publishing person, and they will mentor an unagented author for 3 months to help them revise their manuscript. And so I was able to be chosen in 2014. So now we're literally 3 years later. And we revised the manuscript, and Pitch Wars has an agent showcase. And so you get to do a pitch of like what your book's about in like the first 250 words of the book, and agents get to read it. And if they like it, they will request more. And so one of the people who requested, I think my first request was one Michelle Richter of Fuse Literary. And so she liked it and she read it, and she offered me rep in a bar because we happened to be at the same event, Crime Bake. And so that's what happened. So even then, that still was like I said, like a 3-year journey, so.
Absolutely. Let's jump then. This is a perfect segue over to Michelle, which is she's a senior literary agent at Fuse Literary and a former editor at St. Martin's. She's an adjunct professor at Pace, and her clients have been shortlisted for all of the awards Kellye mentioned.
Plus a lot others.
And a lot of others, including Mary Higgins, The Strand, ITW, so many awards. And she's also
McCavity.
Thank you, Michelle.
Derringer.
The Barry. The Edgar.
Barry, yes, the Edgar.
I love it. So Michelle, I'm so fascinated by both for agents and editors, but because I've heard that when you take on a client or when you take on a book, it's actually not about, I loved the book. Like you will love lots of books. Well, let me just, but it's actually about, can I sell the book? Can I find a place? You may love a book, but it may not be right for you. But so tell us about what happens when you do make that decision or just fall in love with the book. Like what's the magic in it for an agent?
Well, I mean, I have to say, when I found Kellye's work, that was my very first Pitch Wars. It was my first year as an agent. She was one of my first 3 clients.
I think so. Yeah. I was thinking
So it was just like a confluence of magic. It was meant to be, right? But what really grabbed me was it was really voicey, and it was really special, and it was different. So it was all the things I loved, but a lot of things that were different. I mean, it was a little bit of a journey to sell that book. As I'm looking at things now, I'm always picturing, where can this book go? Who publishes books like this? Where am I going to find a home for it? The longer I'm an agent, the more I take on, that does shift. So now I have specific things in mind. But before I was pretty like, let's see what grabs me.
Can I just say one thing? So my book is a cozy mystery with a Black woman main character, which is not seen a lot. And especially in 2014, when Michelle took it on, there weren't any publishers who were publishing books, lighter weight mysteries with Black main characters. So I want to point that out. So when she took me on, it was not because it was going to be an easy sell.
Yeah. And somebody at one point actually asked if she would rewrite it as a rom-com or contemporary romance with mystery elements.
I was mad.
Yeah, she was mad. But it's my job to present to her the opportunities, and then she decides. So she was like, no, absolutely not. And she obviously did the right thing. But it's a weird journey.
That's a tough choice, though. I think that's really interesting. And, any aspiring authors or certainly querying writers right now may come to this type of a situation where, you've written a book that you want to see on the shelf, and there can be, people with other visions. I mean, Kellye, how did you know that? I mean, absolutely nothing wrong with a rom-com, but how did you know to stick to your guns and
because I've read rom-coms, but my first love is mysteries, and since I was little, my mother let me read Sarah Paretsky and Sue Grafton and Walter Mosley and Barbara Neely. And so that's what I wanted to write. And I was naive at the time and thinking oh, there's no Black women cozies because no one must write them. And that's not the case at all. And so I wanted to write for such a long time that once I finally wrote the book, I was going to write the book I wanted to write. I wasn't going to change that, and some people write to market, which is fine if that works for them. And I know a couple people who it's worked for them very well, where they've won awards and sold tons of books and had several book deals. But for me, I was like, I want to write the book I want to write. So
that's great. And then, so you found your perfect agent mate in Michelle. And then Michelle, just tell us a little bit briefly about the process of submission. So that is whenever a book is ready to go and find its agent and publisher home, or sorry, their editor and publisher home. So tell us about the submission process, and then we'll switch over to Terri to tell us about her perspective from the editor's role.
Well, first I have to have a pitch letter, which often is, developing from that initial query. So if you have a great query letter, it's going to move all along the process. I'm going to use it in my pitch. Terri might use it on her book jacket.
We did for us, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if they write a really good one, it's going to keep going. So I've got my pitch letter. I've got my list of editors. I might do it in rounds. Like I might say I want to send it to these people and then these people. Or I might just do a huge blast. It really depends. But I'm querying multiple editors at the same time. And sometimes it's super fast, but usually it's not. And sometimes editors get back to you quickly, but usually they don't. So you really have to be patient. You should try to write something else while you're on submission so that you don't lose your mind, so that you have something else to focus on. It's a long and emotionally fraught process. Some authors want to have updates with every single response from an editor. Some are like, just gang them up. Tell me when there's something good. Tell me once a month, whatever. So you really have to figure out what you want, how you want to work with your agent, and tell us, because we are not psychic and everybody's different.
I think for me, it was hard because you have such control of your career when you're querying agents, when you're writing your book, and then you're literally giving your baby to someone else to trust them to sell the book, which is why it's really important that you like your agent and you trust your agent. And you just don't pick any agent because they say yes. You pick the person you connect with and who has a good track record and who you think is going to love your book enough to sell it, because it took a year for us to sell it for a year. So,
Mm-hmm.
Which is that's an average. I mean, that's a very,
I just sold a book that had been on sub for 3 years.
Yes.
That's long. It is. But sometimes books don't sell at all. And it doesn't mean they're bad.
No, that's right. And speaking of book selling, Terri, we're going to move to you. You began your life as a bookseller at Creamer Books, which I lived right by Creamer Books in Washington, D.C. for a while. I love that bookstore. And you moved to Midwest, worked for a feminist bookstore. And then you spent 10 years at Midnight Ink., which is the publisher that acquired both of Kellye's books in the series. And then now you're an editor at Crooked Lane Books. So welcome.
Thank you.
And tell me about, kind of along these lines, but for an editor, or like in Kellye's case, but what is it about a book that kind of grabs you and you think, yes, this book is right for my list. This is right for the readers that that it's going to be a good fit?
I think my acquisition style is me just falling in love with a book for whatever reason it might be. A lot of voice and character-driven books are things that I pursue. And I quite often know very early on if I like something or not. Like I think I knew I liked Kellye's book, I think within the first 20 pages. By the time I got to 50, I knew for sure I wanted it. And so then that starts the process of acquiring a title.
And for in most cases, is it usually within the first 50 pages, would you say, or 20 pages? What's kind of the...
Yeah, we read until we have a reason to say no, right? So until we have, it's just not working for me. This is just, it falls apart. A lot of people get their books workshopped the first 50 pages. And then after that is, pretty quick. And so, but I do know if I connect with something, even if I see there's plot holes and errors, those can be fixed. I can't fix somebody's voice and their style. That's what comes from them. That's the magic of it. And I knew that with Kellye's awesome. And it's hilarious because I'm the furthest thing from Kellye's character, right? And I'm like, this should not be my book to acquire. I can't believe that it landed on my desk, that it came to me. And I was absolutely thrilled.
And I would say one thing about Terri is that she has published so many amazing authors who other publishers will say no to, because they don't fit certain boxes, because like you said, she picks stuff that she likes and she connects with, and then she buys it. And then of course readers connect with it too, because she's picking books that like that versus like, oh, this book sold 2 years ago, so let's buy one that's just like that, so, and I really appreciate that about her.
Yeah. I mean, and publishers are very risk averse, right? They want to know that something is going to sell. So in order for me to acquire a book, I have to prove it. I have to prove that there's an audience there. And that was difficult in Kellye's case because there weren't any African-American cozies out there for me to comp to. There were no sales records I could look at and say, hey, look at this one is doing really well. There were some other books that came out, I think either right before or right after. Yeah. Kellye's, but when I, 12 months before publication date, when I'm researching it, I couldn't find a thing. And so that makes it hard. I'm glad that publishing is slow to change. But as an acquisitions editor, we are looking at things a little differently.
There were, after we sold to Terri, Alexia Gordon and Valerie Burns and Patricia Sargent, who goes by Olivia Matthews, they all came out, and I, not to toot my own horn or our own horn, but I really like to think that hopefully the success, because my book, had all those awards, Alexia's book won awards, Valerie has 3 series. I like to think that we were able to show publishers like, hey, people read books with Black main characters or people of color main characters. And I like to think that hopefully because of our success and our boosting other people, that's one of the reasons why right now publishers are more open to writers of color. So.
Absolutely. And Terri, then can you just talk a little bit? I think a lot of people imagine that when their agent would send a book over, you would read it and then you'd say, oh yeah, I would love to publish that. And then that's it. But as you were saying, you have to prove that it can sell. Who are you proving that to? And what does that kind of sales pitch look like for an editor? Like their work is not done just because they have a book they love.
No. And I take some of Michelle's work, right? So I'm cribbing from that pitch letter or the query letter that I get. But so I have to show other sales, and I have to say it's like this book. It has the tone of this, but the characters of this are sort of the plot of that. It's a mishmash. And who we're proving it to is the sales department, the publisher, my boss essentially. And then once we do all that work, we fill out a P&L statement. And we're like, yeah, this looks like it's viable. We can make it if we sell X number of copies. Then there's a lot more work that goes into it. There's your developmental edits, and that can go a couple rounds. There's some books recently I've acquired that are going to go a lot more, many rounds. Which is more work for me. But again, it's a book that we took on because we're trying to expand our base of what we're publishing. And then, we have to design the cover, go through many rounds of that, usually with input with the author, titles, back cover copy, all the yucky stuff the editor is part of in the process.
Great. And Kellye, you... I originally met you from Pitch Wars. We had the same mentor in that, Sarah Henning. And you mentioned Pitch Wars before, but I just want to, make sure we take a minute to really talk about this, because there may be a lot of writers out there who have a draft from NaNo sitting on their desk. And, Pitch Wars could be a great step for them, as long as they're like really editing it a lot between now and then, right? So tell us about Pitch Wars, what it meant to you. And you also are a multiple mentor. So kind of what's it like on that side of the desk?
So yeah, I've been mentoring since 2015. I've mentored 6 people. They all have agents and most of them have book deals, including Mia, who you'll meet later, although it was not her Pitch Wars novel. And it's great just because I think when you start out, it's like writing is just you by yourself in a room, and you don't necessarily know people when you are starting out, so it gives you a community of people who are both, on one hand, you have your mentor who is a little bit more ahead of you career-wise, who can give you this expertise and guidance to help you get to where they are career-wise and beyond, but also the community of other mentees that you have too, and I think whenever you have someone who's in the same space as you are in terms of career, it's really great because you guys can kind of, talk to each other and commiserate with each other and things like that. So Pitch Wars provides a really great community. If you're on Twitter, search the hashtag Pitch Wars, and you'll just see, you don't have to be a mentee or a mentor to be part of the community. So you'll see there's a very vibrant community for Pitch Wars. So.
And you're probably one of the best revisers I know.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about, just for people who are have just maybe finished or just starting to look at revisions, what are some tips you have or some advice for them?
I always say my first writing class I ever took, our professor told us, writing is rewriting. And I think you see this, like this book that you see right here is probably like what, draft 15, Michelle? Like it has to be like, and it's like I did 3 before Michelle, and then we did 2, and then Terri and I did a couple more, and then you have copy edits and you have proofing and things like that, So I think people assume with what they see on the shelves is the first draft, and they think that obviously if my first draft is not like this, then I suck as a writer, and it's not true. Writing is rewriting, and I think part of it is getting critique partners and finding that community to give you notes, because even like at my point, I'm on book number 3 for myself, and I still hit a wall of, I don't know what else to do with this book, which is when Michelle comes in, which is when Terri comes in, your editor comes in and provides you feedback, So I would say, write as much as you can, take some time away and look at it again with fresh eyes. You can also do passes for different things, like, oh, I'm going to do a pass for dialogue. I'll do a pass for character, do a pass for plot, but just writing is rewriting. So just keep at it. Don't give up.
That's great. And then Michelle, for an agent, what's something for writers to keep in mind when they start querying? What makes a good fit for an agent, for a writer?
Well, first of all, do your research, look at our wish lists. Most of us have bios that have it. Some of us also are on manuscriptwishlist.com. I know I just updated my bio for that before I reopened to queries. So we're looking for specific things. We're looking for genres. Don't try and like mash your genre into something else just to get into us, because if we don't want that, it's not going to work. Get a sense of us on social media, check our vibe. If you think, oh, this person seems really, too formal for me or too casual for me, then that's probably not going to work, because a lot of it is personality. It's a relationship. We're business partners. I'm really blunt and frank with my feedback. If you need somebody who's going to hold your hand and put it in a velvet glove, I'm not the right person. So a lot of it's personality and taste, and look at the books we're publishing, look at our website, see who our clients are, see who those books are, read those books. So read in your genre, do your research. That's my big 2 points of advice.
Love it. And Terri, do you have a little just advice for writers as they're kind of approaching submission and the editorial side, or like what makes a good relationship then with an editor once they're signed?
Well, before they get signed, I would say that Crooked Lane is a publisher that takes unagented submissions, which is why I have probably over 1,000 in my inbox at any given day. But I prefer to work with agents because it is a business relationship, and the agent always is looking out for the author. And that's very important, that an author is protected by their agent when working with a publisher. That said, once the things are done, once the contract is signed and we're working on a book, I would say stand firm in the things that you absolutely want, but trust that your editor is working in your best interest. We really want to put the best book out there. And so you might not agree with why I want to change something, but take a step back and look at it critically and determine what you want to die on, right? What one thing you're going to stand on.
I always say pick your battles. I always tell that to new authors who are debuts. I'm like, pick your battles. Like they changed my title, and that wasn't a battle I wanted to fight, but I was a bit more, had more opinions about my cover, so if you don't want to be the person who says no to everything.
Yeah, I always tell writers to never be wed to their titles, because people's titles change more often than they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So true. And then I'm seeing a lot of questions, and if we don't get to them, I'm thinking what we'll do is just, if you follow Sisters in Crime over on Twitter, over the next several days, I'll kind of jump in and we'll answer some of these questions. Some of them are great questions, but I think we can answer them pretty easily just over Twitter. So just watch for that if we don't get to your questions. So that was fantastic. Terri, Michelle, Kellye, thank you so much for being here and sharing that. I know you are, Kellye has kellyegarrett.com. She's on all social media, especially Twitter. You have to follow Kellye on Twitter. Michelle, you're on Twitter?
Yes.
Terri, are you
MICH Richter 1.
Great. And Terri, you as well?
Yes. Yep.
Perfect.
Terri Bischoff, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. And now we're going to switch over to my editor at Thomas & Mercer, which is a division of Amazon Publishing, Jessica Tribble Wells. I'm so excited to have this chance to chat with her. I truly feel like I could not have gotten luckier with my agent or my publisher, and working with Jessica is, well, it's great in that it leveled me up in so many ways. And I think that's something so powerful that, an agent can do, but certainly an editor can really help a writer grow. So I'm so excited to get to talk to you. And thank you for being here. Let me just share a little of your bio and then just a little bit about how our paths crossed. So Jessica is is it senior acquisitions editor? Let me make sure I get the title right. Yeah, I was like, I think she's a senior. Yeah, for Thomas & Mercer, and she joined the team in 2013 doing subsidiary rights for Brilliance Publishing. And she, prior to that, she worked and was an editor at Poison Pen Press. And she, as an editor, helps navigate authors through every step of the way, which I can attest to wonderfully. And as a random fun fact, because I just saw this on Facebook, Jess Lowry is your author, right?
She is.
Right? Yeah. So her book, Unspeakable Things, just hit the 250,000 copy sold mark. So I think that's definitely worth celebrating.
Yes,
and Jessica Lowry is also just a fantastic person, actually a kind of book coach. And we have an event coming up with Jess, Sisters in Crime does next week. So definitely you don't want to, she's doing a revision workshop and she is such a pro, I'm sure, as Jessica knows, and we don't want to miss that because she's awesome. So let me just start by saying that when my debut was published, I had been trying to be published since 2007. So it was, and my debut was published in 2019. So it was a journey for me as well. And I definitely, did my best to learn about craft and editing. When I started NaNoWriMo, I, knew I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but again, it's all about revision. And I spent over a year revising. So even with all I learned, I was just amazed at how much an editor brings to the table. I mean, you have an idea, but like just the precision and the view of what you're doing is incredible. So just let's start out by just telling a little bit about, what maybe writers don't even realize that they're kind of missing from their manuscripts and how it is the kind of big things an agent is kind of looking for as they're considering whether or not, that book is right for them.
Sure. So, as an editor, we're often coming to these manuscripts after they've been through an agent edit, which obviously the last group just talked about, after you've been through however many drafts. And then we're going to come at it with fresh eyes and we're going to say, there's more things to do. So the team that I'm on, most of us go through, I would say 2 to 3 edits, of the 2 to 3 reads and a full edit probably before it even goes off to a developmental editor. And we are a bit unique in that we work with developmental editors instead of doing all the developmental editing in-house, although it's a collaborative process. So the developmental editor will rely on our notes, mine or anybody else's on the team, in order to figure out what direction we're really going in with the novel, to really help craft what's going to be best for the author and what's going to be best for the publisher as we think about what's going to sell, what's going to stick out to readers, what's going to be that hook that we want to talk about. It's tricky though, because it is a lot of revision. How many drafts did we do with your book? Do you remember? I feel like it was 4 or 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say 4 or 5. Yeah.
It's a lot. The shortest I've ever seen is 2, but that was somebody who's written 25 novels. So I feel like at that point, you sort of know what you're doing. And heaven only knows how many drafts he had done before it had even come into us. So by the time I get a manuscript, I mean, you're thinking, yes, it is going to be so strong. It's going to be so perfect. It's going to be everything I need it to be. And then somebody else sits down and reads it and you go, why didn't I see those things when I looked down at the page in the first place? But that's why I'm here. Because that fresh set of eyes is really important to helping you see the best thing. It's funny. You think about it, authors really write in a bubble, except that it's a very collaborative process, publishing a book. You have marketing people and you have editors and you have agents and you have everybody giving their 2 cents to help craft this thing and really turn it into something beautiful and wonderful that readers are going to enjoy, we hope.
Absolutely. I'm so interested in, and this feels really relevant probably to a lot of viewers, what it takes to be a debut, because, it's to bring in someone new who's unproven is a bit of a risk, both for an agent and for an editor. And you've published many, wonderful debuts and have more coming out this year. I've read a couple of them actually. And tell me about, does a debut feel different to you? Are you thinking, as an editor, thinking about a debut in a different way? Kind of, what's that process like for you?
Absolutely. So I think, as most people know, part of what helps a book sell, well, let me back up a little further. As an editor, when a manuscript comes in to me, what I'm looking for is something that has really great voice, that really jumps out to me, that stands out in a way that is unusual. But it's tricky too, because I'm not the only person who gets to decide whether or not we acquire something. It goes to an acquisitions board. And I prepare a lot of documents that say, this is how this book is going to be positioned. This is who I think it's similar to. This is the kind of genre that it falls into. These are all the various reasons that I think this book is going to sell well. And then I present that to the board and we talk about it, and then we decide whether or not it's going to be something that we as a publisher want to take on and to move forward with. That's a lot easier oftentimes when you have somebody who's published before, because they have a history. And so you can say, oh, okay, well, so-and-so sold this many books before, or, we've really heard great things about them and their reputation. With a debut, you're really resting more squarely on your gut and how those concepts look in terms of other books. Is this something we're seeing too much of? So I'm trying to think what's really, really hot right now. It changes at any given moment, right? We're thinking, okay, is this another psychological suspense? Is it really similar to other psychological suspense novels that we have on our list? Is there something about it that makes it unique, that makes it stand out, and that makes it make us think, well, readers are really going to be attached to this? We're looking for those things that make it distinctive. So if somebody turns down your book, as I think Michelle already said on the last time, it's not about the quality of the writing necessarily. It often has a lot to do with other factors. Do we have too many other titles that are similar to that on the list? Does it have distinctive voice? Do we have an idea of how we think we can really get new readers for this person? And with debuts, so much of that is about finding the right editor and really finding a partnership that you can work with, because your editor has to put themselves behind this book and to say, hey, look, this is somebody I'm willing to take a bet on. And this is somebody whose voice I think is worth hearing.
And I also, when I was a kind of a newbie, and to some degree still am, but in this process, I was so amazed, and Terri was talking about this a little bit, of all of the pieces that, plates that have to spin in the air in order for a book to be published. In a lot of ways, it almost feels like you're this exceptional project manager to get it, it's incredible. Can you talk a little bit more about what a new writer's experience is going to be about, what all the plates that are spinning to make their book come out?
Sure. So I think you're absolutely right that especially at Thomas and Mercer and at the other Amazon imprints, we do sort of act as project managers. As I mentioned, we have developmental editors that we work with. We have copy editors we work with. We have proofreaders we work with. And in the meantime, we're also working with marketing, with PR, and with other departments, the cover designers, to try to come up with a cohesive package that puts this book in the best light that it can be for the readers. You mentioned a little bit about my background. I started at Poison Pen Press as an intern, and small presses, you get to do all of the jobs that you can imagine, and that includes a lot of project management. And when I actually worked at Brilliance Audio, which is an Amazon subsidiary out in Michigan, I was their I have forgotten what I was. Managing editor. That was what I was, which is really just a lot of project management again. So that project management skill is something that I think you really do need to have as you're coming into these projects and looking at them and saying, okay, what sort of things have to get done in order to make sure that we have the right book, all of these different pieces working together in order to come out with something great. And I think different editors have different experiences and different strengths. I think that really pulling all those things together makes for the best experience for the author. It is collaborative, but at the end of the day, it's also about what we think is going to sell. So sometimes we have to go back and forth a little bit on the cover. Is this the right cover for the reader? What are they expecting? What sort of thing is looking really great right now? What's going to show up strongly when you look at it online, when you look at it on a bookshelf, when you look at it in other places? Michelle and Kellye and Terri talked about that promo copy text and how that query letter comes in, and we can use a lot of that information there. We work hard with some different writers who help us put together the best possible description of these books. And that goes through a lot of tweaking too. I think we go through 2 or 3 rounds often on those as well to find the right thing, the right way to represent the book on the back. And on the websites and all the places that you might see it for sale. That can vary quite a bit. You'll see things that are really pitchy that don't tell you a lot about the book. You'll see others that have more information about the book. We try to find someplace in between that has that, the snap to it that makes you want to read the book, but also has enough information that you know what the book is about. I think we've all had that experience where you pick up a book and you look at the cover and you think, oh, that's nice. You turn it over or you open the inside flap and you read and you go, I have no idea what this book is about. It's not a great experience. How are you going to take a risk? How are you going to take a chance, especially on a debut author?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
So there has to be something there that really drives us to experience this book in a new way. And all those pieces have to come together to create, something great that we can put out into the world. And, frustratingly, sometimes you put all these pieces together and it goes out and you think you have everything lined up and the book sells well, but not as well as you hope it will. Or the book sells amazing and you have something that really blows it out of the water. I wish we had the magic formula. If we did, then I would retire and I would go live somewhere else and I wouldn't have to do this anymore. But we could still publish great stories, which is really what this is all about.
Absolutely. Georgia Taylor had a really great question, which is, what do you look for in a memorable protagonist?
Oh, interesting. So what we're often looking for is somebody who feels real and authentic. And I know the word authentic gets tossed around a lot, but it's really important that your protagonist feel human. And that means flaws. The way that they talk needs to sound distinctive and interesting and like somebody that you would meet. I don't know that it necessarily has to be somebody who has a quirk or anything of that variety, although that does make somebody more memorable. But it can be a variety of things. In Vanessa's book, it was this distinctive voice, this woman who was really working through all of these problems, both external and internal. In the Jess Lowry book that we were just talking about, Unspeakable Things, it was the voice of a 14-year-old girl in an adult novel, which is a bit unusual. In others, it might just be somebody who is facing a problem that we can see ourselves in. So I think authenticity is really key.
Mm. And then if someone is considering maybe someday becoming an editor, I was kind of curious about your thoughts about what qualities make a good editor, and what would maybe draw someone to that job?
I mean, don't we all want to be editors? I mean, we all read all the time. You either want to be a writer or an editor if you're that person who spent your lunch hours in the library. I was definitely that person who spent my lunch hours in the library. So it's somebody who's really familiar with reading, somebody who really understands the story, who finds great passion in the written word and what's going on. I have a certificate in scholarly publishing and editing that I got at the same time that I got my master's degree in the ever useful Renaissance literature category, because I use that on a daily basis. But the editing turned out to be really valuable, knowing some of the basics of your grammar. So I took an entire year's worth of courses on the Chicago Manual of Style. Scintillating stuff. I mean, I find it really interesting, but I'm not sure that it's for everybody. I think passion about the projects. I think a strong grasp and understanding of the written word and good grammatical skills are obviously a must. An understanding of the genre or subgenres that you really want to work in. And of course, these positions are competitive. People want them, right? These are jobs that are hard to come by. I would say that most people that ended up as editors at this point have come through somewhat unusual positions. They've either come in through other angles like marketing or PR or any other varieties of places at publishers, or they've come through up through internships, which is exactly what I did. As I mentioned, when I was at Poison Pen Press, we did a variety of jobs, and I did some editorial, but I did a lot of other managerial sort of things. And I was thinking about business models and what sort of books we needed to be looking at and thinking about the trends. So it's thinking about books as a whole, more than just the words on the page, but how it interacts with the other books on your list, how it interacts with other books that might be coming out around the same time. And of course, how you feel about the story.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So I was also thinking about how, Poison Pen Press was an indie, and certainly Amazon Publishing is not an indie, but they in some ways do have some really inventive approaches around marketing and things, which I just loved working with. For people who are kind of thinking do I want to kind of go an indie press? Do I want to do more traditional? Can you kind of tell me about kind of your experience and your feelings about that journey for the writer, maybe things to consider?
Sure. So I think, as the last panelist discussed, it's really about finding the people that you gel with. And that goes for your agent as well as for your editor. It is not unusual for agents to submit manuscripts to multiple editors and for editors to then have phone calls with those agents and or authors to discuss. In fact, I know we did that with your book. Yes. And we sat down and we talked and we tried to figure out if this was a good fit and which imprint would make the most sense. Yes. Different presses handle things differently. Amazon Publishing and its various imprints are obviously in a category where we're thinking about how sales might work in terms of who our online readers are. But then we're also thinking about how do we get this book into the right reader's hands. The independent presses are thinking about things, still thinking about how to sell books, of course, but they're thinking about it in a different scale with a different focus, perhaps. It really depends. I would say that the personal relationships are the most important part that you're looking for. So who is the editor that you're going to be working with? Do they have a vision for your book that jives with what you're thinking about for your book? Do they have a vision for your writing and your career that jives about what you're thinking about for your writing and for your career? Really, I can use sentences today. So I think those personal connections are the most important, and understanding what that means for your agent, for you, for your career. I don't think there's a clear-cut answer there so much as I think it's about what you're after.
Mm-hmm. And which is sometimes hard to answer.
It is.
Because you don't always know until you know.
Yeah, and the differences between the presses, who's doing what really differs by personnel. It's not a clear-cut answer. I can't say, well, Amazon does X, Y, and Z, and small presses do A, B, and C, and somebody in New York does LMN. There's no clarity there. We're all doing everything that we can to possibly sell books and to get them in front of readers.
Absolutely. And so also just kind of thinking about when someone does sign on with a publisher and they start that editor relationship, what are some qualities that you found to be really helpful or for people to keep in mind to just sort of be your favorite writer that you're working with?
You're all my favorite writers, then. I have no favorite children. Again, I keep coming back to that personal connection, but that's really what it's about. It's about looking at the words and something that the editor really connects to in the material and finding an editor who really is going to advocate for you and your material. We want to make sure that whomever we're working with is as good a fit for us as we are for them. You certainly don't want to enter into a publishing agreement with somebody that you don't feel understands your work or that you don't feel is doing things to improve your work in that way, to drive you to be a better writer or to help find the right readers for you. Again, personal connection and authenticity. That's all I can talk about.
And we have just a couple minutes left. So if you do have a question, definitely pass it along. But with your time you spend at Brilliance and just with audiobooks being such a huge part of the market right now, are there, things for authors to keep in mind about, their audiobook opportunities and some are first to audiobook, things like that? How are you seeing kind of audio in this space?
Audio is definitely something that we're, as you mentioned, that we're seeing more of. I think it's sort of fascinating. I expected that audio was going to have a different life this year, given that people were spending less time in their cars, but that doesn't seem to have been what happened. I think people are still really in love with audiobooks and with the performances that happen there. Audiobooks, one of the things I will say is that authors often think they want to read their own books on audio. And I promise you, most of the time, you do not. It is grueling. It is exhausting. It's really hard to pronounce words consistently and to read consistently. I mean, I've been on this panel for 15 minutes and I've stumbled over myself 3 to 15 times. And that's what happens when you're reading under pressure. It's hard. So I would say trust the people who are producing your audiobooks to know what's best for your audiobook and rely on your agent to help you navigate that process.
So kind of an interesting question about mentorship. I'm sure you've had mentors along the way, and if writers are switching out for mentors, what do you think makes an effective kind of mentor relationship in this business?
I think that writing mentors are a bit tricky. My husband also writes and he also has a mentor. And it's again, you're going to hear me say it again. It's about that personal connection again. And it's about somebody who is being honest with you. I think too often it's easy to get into these positions where nobody wants to say something mean about somebody else's writing. But that's not the world we're in. And we need that criticism to help grow, to help better craft the writing. And that includes, it also prepares you for the editorial process if and when you do find somebody who's willing to publish and put that money behind the book and to help get it out into the world. So find somebody who's willing to be honest, who's willing to be authentic, and who's willing to really work with you and that you like working with. As Michelle said before, the same applies with agents. If you don't like their style, it's not going to be a good relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. Thank you. Then that question was from Ray Jansen. So thank you for asking that, Ray. And thank you, Jessica. This was so wonderful. It's great to see you too. I normally get to see you at conferences, but those haven't happened.
One day we will see each other again.
I know. Let's hope soon. So thank you so much for being here and for being such an incredible editor. I just truly feel like the luckiest writer. You were wonderful and lots of gratitude from me. So thank you.
But I have the greatest authors, so it helps.
Oh, thank you. Awesome. Okay, now we're going to pivot on over to session 3, which is about the debut journey and sharing your voice. I'm so excited to dive into this as well. We're going to have, I'll start with Mia. So Mia Manansala is a writer and certified book coach. Oh, that's so cool. We got to get into that too, Mia. In Chicago, who loves books, baking, and badass women. Like, perfect. She uses humor and murder to explore aspects of Filipino dysphoria, queerness, and her millennial love for pop culture. Her debut novel, which I can see it behind her, is Arsenic and Adobo, which is coming out from Berkeley Penguin Random House. And we're so, May 4th, pre-order, click, 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 pre-order. And we're so lucky to have her 2 editors here and to do a discussion about the debut experience, as well as how important it is to share your own personal voice. So Mia, let me just kind of start out with you, and then we'll pivot over to your editors. I read an essay that you wrote for Criminal Element, and you really beautifully were talking about just how important writing Filipino American characters were to you. And one quote that stood out was just, "If I don't tell my stories, then who will?" And, I think, at least, especially from the perspective of Sisters in Crime, we want to elevate as many voices into crime fiction as possible. And you were an Eleanor Taylor Bland Award recipient, and as well as a judge after. So just tell us a little bit about, particularly, I would say, for people who are watching this and maybe they just wrote a manuscript and maybe it is a little personal for them. Maybe they're writing about their background, their sexuality, experiences they have had. What is it about finding the value in your own voice and kind of and pushing it forward and telling your story, because no one else will if you don't?
All right, thanks. Yeah, so writing can just be so intensely personal, even when you're writing a humorous murder mystery that has like kind of nothing to do with your real life. Little bits of yourself leak through in your writing no matter what. I mean, to be completely honest, in my first novel, which never got picked up, writing that character who is queer is how I figured out I was queer at like age 29. So for those of you who struggle with your identity, whether it's your ethnicity, your religious affiliation, your sexuality, your gender identity, like you're always learning, and writing is a really, really great way to help you figure those things out. For me, I've always loved reading. Like Kellye said, I grew, like, my mom loves mysteries. She used to work for Walden Books, RIP, those of you who remember. She's the one who, she got me started with like Mary Higgins Clark. She's the one who got me reading cozies. And, I noticed that all these books I loved never had anyone who even slightly resembled me, And the times I would find Filipino writers or Filipino American writers, it was like serious literature, which is like great. Like, these are beautifully written, like the lit fic is necessary, the poetry is necessary, but that's not who I am. I wanted characters who could go on adventures, who could just fall in love, who could be the hero, who could go into space and fight and do all different kinds of things that, before you mostly only saw white characters get to do. I want queer characters who have a happy ending and who don't have to suffer, and their stories are not only about coming out. I want Asian characters who are not just about immigration or trauma or things like that. And so that's what I write, Yes, there are some serious themes in my books because my background informs your characters. It does not have to be the plot. So the fact that my characters are Filipino American changes the way they look at the world, changes the way the world sees them. But like, I don't wake up in a Filipino way and fix my Filipino hair and eat my, that doesn't have to change anything necessarily. So I just wanted stories that focus on that. So there will be serious elements because I write crime fiction. I'm a woman of color who, so those things will sneak in, but.
And let me also just ask you about your journey, and then we'll jump over to your two editors. But kind of tell us about your journey to getting to where you were about to have your debut published in just a few months. Probably not an A to B story. It usually isn't. Mine certainly wasn't. So, so tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. Yeah, and I like talking about this because I want people to know that like, it's not easy and there will be setbacks. So my first novel that I mentioned involves a queer Filipino American woman solving a murder at a comic book convention. It won some awards. It is how I met Kellye Garrett, who was my mentor, which is how I got into Pitch Wars. I got in with that novel. It's the novel that got me my first agent, who we are not currently together anymore, amicably parted. So like, don't, you know.
But that is also very common. I didn't know that until I kind of got into this business, that, you know, it's a business relationship and that happens.
Yeah. And so just so you know, like that first book was on stub for 1.5 years. And I got so close several times. I made it to acquisitions, which is so like, for you future writers out there, there's always like one more step, right? You always think like, once I get the agent, I'll have it made. Once I get this, I'll have, like you have to convince the agent has to convince the editor has to convince the sales team, who has to, and there's just like so many hoops you have to jump through. So it failed at acquisition, like that final step, that buying step, it failed 3 times, right? And while I was doing it, the best thing you can do when you're doing this is to write the next thing. And for me, luckily, the next thing is the book that became my debut. And I was working on that. I used NaNoWriMo not to draft it, but to revise it, because I realized I was taking a really long time with it. And knowing that the first book was failing, I kind of wanted to move on to the next thing. So I used it, I revised it, I sent it to my agent, and she didn't like it. She was very honest with me. She's like, I love this first book that I couldn't sell. This book I could sell, but I don't love it. And you deserve someone who does. So when I said we parted amicably, we did. She was looking out for my best interests, right? It hurt at the time, but she was right. You know, someone who does not love your book is not going to do right by your book because they don't understand your book. And especially as a woman of color, you know, there are already so many barriers. So I need someone who's going to champion me. So we amicably split up, and I had to start querying again. And then luckily I found my wonderful agent, and like, so it's a happy story, people. It's going to be, you know, so after we split up, I found my agent almost immediately. I got the first offer for Arsenic Adobo in less than a week. It's sold in like 2 weeks at auction. So it's a ride. Publishing is a roller coaster, and I really hope you have people who are very supportive in your life to be there for you during that time, because it can be rough.
Absolutely. So let's shift over to two of both your editors who made that dream come true. I'm going to start with Michelle. Michelle Vega is an executive editor at Berkeley, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. She started her career as an intern for Viking and then an editorial coordinator at Alpha Books. And she started with Berkeley in 2005, and she's been acquiring fantastic mysteries for the Prime Crime List ever since. And she also loves suspense thrillers. And you have a 4-year-old son. So when you saw my son jamming his face in here, you were not like shocked.
Not at all. In fact, I'm using his Zoom account right now. So that's
so cute.
For school. Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Wonderful. So a little bit along the lines of kind of what I was talking to Jessica about, this idea of what it takes to kind of launch a debut, and, you know, definitely reference Mia's absolutely fantastic book that everyone's going to buy when it comes out. But also just kind of in general, like, what does it take to really think, okay, I can sell this on up the chain and make this happen?
For me, and I think, you know, I'm echoing a lot of what other people have said, but I'm looking, you know, for that sort of great fresh hook, which I think is always important. Even more so for me are characters, especially a lot of the books I do, as you mentioned, are series books. So it's characters that you want to spend time with, because I feel like you're sort of starting a relationship as a reader. You're picking up this book and it's somebody you'd want to be friends with. When I read Mia's book and I met Leela and I saw, who she was, she made me laugh out loud. She kept me going page to page to page. I was like, I want to hang out with her. I want to hang out with her family. I want to hang out in this restaurant. Like, I want to be here. And it's a great feeling, because there's a good chance that if you're feeling that way, other people will too. And I think that was, a key thing. And just being in a place, especially now, something that's fun, that moves you. I think both can be done, as Mia was saying. That's really what I'm looking for. It is starting a friendship, and it's that way for the editor, as well as the reader. So that's what I would say.
I love it. Angela, I'm going to ask you a very similar question. So Angela Kim is an editorial assistant at Berkeley, which is also an imprint of Penguin Random House and specializing in commercial fiction. She previously worked in government contracting, so probably that project management comes in handy as well.
Yeah.
And she's been at Berkeley for 2 years and is building her list in several genres, including contemporary rom-coms, which we're going to talk about because I love romance, even though I write crazy thrillers, millennial women's fiction, cozy mysteries, and you also love to bake. So Mia's book obviously has a restaurant at the heart of it. Tell me about kind of what it is for you that gets you excited about Mia's book, or any debut that you just think, oh my gosh, we have to get this one.
I mean, I kind of have to echo what Michelle just said, because she kind of like took the words right out of my mouth. It had such a fresh hook. Like, she received the submission and I immediately jumped out like reading it. And I was like, wow, I need to read this. I want to be friends with her also. And the food descriptions were amazing. I love Filipino food, so that was a huge plus. But I could also relate to the character a lot in many ways too. And the way that she was able to like mesh humor and serious like family elements into it was really well done. So I really like that aspect as well. But yeah, just immediately from the very first page, the first sentence was amazing. So after that, I was like, can I just be a part of this? Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And Michelle, I'll go back to you too. With a mystery series, what are some of the kinds of things that go into launching it? Like you said, a character that you love, you want to be in the restaurant, like a great cover, because I absolutely love Mia's cover. It's so gorgeous. So just tell people about just some of the things that go into kind of launching this new mystery debut or otherwise.
Well, like I said, you're looking, and I think other people have mentioned this too before, where you're talking about it, and your job as an editor is to really get a lot of other people excited about it too. And I think that's something, when you can walk in to, we used to walk into our editorial meetings, now they're on the Zoom screen. But when you'd walk into a meeting and be able to say, really, I mean, people call it the elevator pitch, but it's like a line or two, and everyone in the room, you look around and you see all these faces light up, and people get excited, so that's like the very beginning. But we've been talking about this for this whole, great presentation, that people, you're coming at it from getting all of the pieces in play, the cover, the copy, we write our own copy with the author, with the help of the agent's pitch letter. It all, comes to fruition in the copy, looking at the covers, getting that right look. That is something that, I think is one of the key things. And I think that's the moment when it really becomes real for the author, when they see that cover, and that to me is one of the most fun parts, because we do these, we sort of put together these presentations where I go to the author and I say, what were you thinking? What covers do you love? What images do you love? What are you looking, what do you want to see? What do you feel? We have a discussion, they send images, I send images, we have this whole back and forth. And then basically, you create this presentation to show what you feel. and then everyone's there. You've got the publisher, you've got your editorial director, you've got the whole, and now, you know, it's a you know, a discussion online with everyone while you're showing your PowerPoint, you know, kind of like you were in school, like showing exactly what you think, and everybody weighs in, and then you've got this whole, you know, it's like that beginning spark, and then it's just taken to the art director, finding the right artist, getting you samples, seeing all these beautiful things, and then having the author's input, which always makes it better when you're showing them a sketch, and Mia can say this, you know, helping to kind of craft that final look. You know, so that there's that, you know, that amazing part of it. Then you've got your other, you know, support teams, the production editors, you've got your copy editors, you've got every stage of the manuscript, and then publicity and marketing, coming up with the plan, like really, you know, doing all of that, and you're all working together. There's so many different moving parts, and I feel, you know, the editor, and then obviously the author is the center, and then the editor is right there, you know. So it's great. It's a lot, but I can't imagine doing anything else, and I don't think I'd be good at anything else. So I'm lucky I'm doing this.
And then Angela, let me talk to you just a little bit about just the kind of bringing these new voices, bringing own voices, bringing something that is maybe newer to your list. What's that like for an editor, and as you're searching? Because I believe we're all just very hopeful that you know, we're going to just see more and more of own voices books, just like Mia's. And but a lot of that does rely on the editor. So just kind of tell us about that piece of it.
Right. So I mean, with all the genres that I work with, I'm always looking for own voices works, which we're seeing a lot more of, which I think is so great. I love reading about different cultures, experiences, relationships, from all these different perspectives and stories. But I think Mia touched upon this before, but I just love how we're seeing more stories that aren't just centered on the trauma or the immigrant experience or something like that, but it's becoming more of the norm just to see like someone fall in love, or just anything like that, just like a regular person. And it's just been really great to see more submissions like that, from authors with many different backgrounds. And I think that I'm lucky to work at an imprint where they really embrace that and they welcome it. And so I've never been like worried or scared about introducing a submission that might not like be as popular, but I'm always pretty confident that they'll encourage me to go after it if I really truly loved it.
I love it. That's great. And then back to Mia. So as you're, like before I even had met you, I had seen all of these awards that you have won because you're a great writer, but you were so incredibly active in the crime fiction community. And I think this is so important because it's something I learned over the 13 years I was trying to be published, which is writing can be lonely if you want it to be. And it is from time to time, but really there are so many communities out there that can support you. You can find friends, you can enter contests. So can you just talk a little bit about the impact that, you know, maybe Sisters in Crime or Crime Writers of Color, what organizations and have had on your journey as a writer?
Yeah, absolutely. I make no secret of how important like the community has been to me and how so much of my success is because of how active I am, right? It's like, that's not to disparage the hard work. Like, obviously I put in all the work myself. You know, people weren't just like, oh, I like her, let's just throw money at her. Like, it was not like that, right? But, so like it basically all started. So I took a one-day like writing class because I've never, like, I didn't study writing in school. I was never able to afford that, you know, kind of a thing. But one day I decided I really wanted to take this seriously. And I found a local one-day, relatively inexpensive class that I could take. And it happened to be about writing mysteries. And I had never thought about writing mystery before. I just really loved them. And the class was taught by a woman named Lori Rader Day, who is the immediate past president of Sisters in Crime. And in that class is where I came up with the first idea for my first novel. And she looked at the beginning and she was like, "You've never written before?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "I think you might be a mystery writer." And at the time, she was the president of my Mystery Writers of America Midwest. And she invited me to a free meeting. And so like, I want to stress not just how important community is like as a beginning writer, but for those of you who are established, how important it is to like to reach out a hand to people who are new, because like I'm an introvert, as are many writers, you know, and it's really scary to just enter a room where you don't know anybody. So having that person who was just like, "I see potential in you, you should come to this meeting." She was the one who told me about the Malice Domestic grant, which I won, and that's how I got to meet Kellye Garrett. So like there was this snowball effect. I went to that class, she welcomed me in, she told me about this opportunity. I got to meet Kellye Garrett, who introduced me to so much, you know, so, and like, even if it wasn't for these awards and opportunities that people were handing me, as I said, writing is hard. So having people on the same path as me who were going through the same difficulties, who have been there before, or, you know, are at the exact same spot, having someone to talk to who understood, you know, like my family loves me, but they don't get publishing. You know, my husband studied television writing in college, but it's not the same as like prose writing or book. But so like he gets it on a creative level, but he doesn't understand anything, you know, so having people who really get what you're going through is so useful. It's so helpful.
But I remembering back to kind of my early writing days in particular, I was so intimidated to go to meetings, and I was, you know, do you have like a little pep talk or a little bit of advice for someone? Maybe they're just really nervous about asking for help or just going to a meeting or, you know, signing up for something.
I mean, honestly, for the first few meetings, like I went and I absorbed the information and I maybe didn't talk to anybody because everyone kind of knew each other, right? So, you know, like it's fine to start small. Like you're still learning anyway. Like again, so like you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know what a query letter was, you know, in 2015. But I went to those meetings. I was just like, oh, that's how you find an agent? Okay, well, you know, so like just gathering. So like maybe I wasn't quite making friends just yet, but I was learning more about the craft. I was learning more about the business. And then in time, because I started going more often, people started noticing me. Most other people reached out their hands because again, they were already established. They knew, so they were kind enough to invite me in. You know, because otherwise, you know, I'm that person at the party. I'm like, where is the food or where is the dog? You know, like I'm kind of like hanging on those edges. So again, like please, those of you who, you know, are a little more established, if you notice someone awkwardly, you know, longingly gazing and wanting to join in, you know, introduce yourself.
That's great. So we have a question that actually all three of you maybe could hit around Instagram, which is something we haven't talked about. And I'm obsessed with Instagram. I love it. And Mia, you do such a great job with your Instagram and swag and your Twitter. So talk a little bit about, we'll go first, Mia, you as an author, like Instagram, social media, the value for you. And then we can shift it to kind of talk about from an editor publishing perspective.
Okay. I mean, I'm glad you like my Instagram. Like, I'm not excellent at photography. Like, I don't have the patience, you know, to like line up the most beautiful, perfect shot. I think what I bring is like a little bit of like, I guess like people say authenticity. You know, people will talk about your author brand and it doesn't have to sound as manufactured as like as it sounds. It doesn't have to be as manufactured as it sounds, sorry. You know, for me, like my brand is like books, baking, geek stuff, and like dogs, you know, and it's just like, yes, it's my brand. And I'm kind of like, you know, because I don't know, you're not going to want every single piece of my life. And I don't want to share every single piece of my life, but these are things I genuinely care about. And they happen to be related to what I'm into, you know, like I think as much as I love my cover and as much as I plaster it everywhere, it gets really boring if I'm just like, hey, you know, like it gets so like, here is a piece of my life. Here is this great recipe I just tried. Here is an awesome Filipino made earring brand, live inspired jewelry on Etsy. You know, so like also like as I'm a writer, but I'm also a reader. So one of my favorite things to do is scream about other books that I love. So like it's never just about me, you know, you should be promoting other writers as well.
Absolutely. That's such a good advice. Something I think about a lot is like, you know, when good things happen to you, it's awesome and it feels good, but those are often far between in that you're mostly working, but you can be celebrating every day if you're celebrating other people's successes, and it feels great to do it. Yeah, absolutely. So then let's kind of shift that question over. Michelle, do you want to just talk about Instagram and just like the social media strategy around launching a book?
I'm very fortunate. I think we're very fortunate at Berkeley, and Mia and Angela and I were all just talking about this today on a call with publicity and marketing. And so this is a great question. So I think, you know, the thing that, you know, has shifted over the years, you know, back in the day when I started, you know, everything was about, you know, the in-person event, the print ad, you know, all of these things that over the course of my career, you know, it's all shifted. It's all shifted. And the thought of being able to reach the most people, it's become the internet, it's become social media, it's become getting the word out every way that you can, utilizing those tools. So I think that that's a key shift in the industry, and it's also allowed, like I said, to get into, you know, far more households, meet more people now, especially in this time of you know, the time that we're living in. An event can be like we're having right now. You can reach all of these readers and everyone's safe, everyone's comfortable, and you're still being able to tell your story and get people interested in it. And I think that's key. And I think, you know, as far as, you know, we've got people that are dedicated to it. I'll admit, social media, I'm so grateful to them, because I am just not as active as, you know, I probably should be. And I'm so delighted that we have these professionals that are all in. They know everything about Instagram. They know how to utilize, you know, NetGalley, BookBub, all the blasts that, you know, email blasts, Facebook, targeted advertising, all of that stuff that can come with, you know, social media. And the Instagram stuff is gorgeous. I mean, what they do, you know, taking these you know, these gorgeous covers, putting the, you know, you're like, you feel like you're there, like you're you know, you want to be there. You want to be there with that cup of, you know, that latte and that book. You know, we've got people that, you know, are just real experts in it, and you see the engagement and you can see the excitement, you know, online. You can see it growing and building and getting all these different pieces of it. So yeah, I think it's incredibly exciting. I think it makes so much sense. You know, it's something, again, like when I started back in 2005, you wouldn't have thought that this is the world that you could have, and this is the reach that you could have. And I think it's the reach that's key, especially for debut authors.
Absolutely. Angela, have you had a kind of a similar experience, or maybe even share like what you're kind of excited about lately from a social media perspective?
Yeah, I mean, our team has, like, since the pandemic started, they've been going really hard in the social media sphere, and particular on Instagram, they've been doing so many great things, like Instagram lives with some of our colleagues, or having the authors do Instagram lives on our page, or these like cute little templates that bookstagrammers or just anyone can copy and paste and do these like fun little like survey type of things. Yeah, it just, the fact that it's so easy and so quick to be able to share a book that you're interested in to someone else, that just makes it so much like easier to just get it out to so many more people. And even before I started working in publishing, I remember I would follow a bunch of bookstagrammers or publishers' accounts, and that's how I would get my book recommendations. I sadly, like, I wouldn't have gone to like bookstores in person as much, but because I got all of these recommendations, I would go to these bookstores, know what I want, and like pick them out. So social media has really helped to shape like what people read and what people get interested in.
Right. Hashtag Bookstagram made me do it.
Basically, yeah.
Yes. I love it. So we're winding down. So really quickly, Angela and Michelle, a couple lines about why everyone needs to run and pre-order Arsenic and Adobo.
It's so much fun. That's, I think, a key thing. I want to let Angela speak more to it, but you will love the world. You will love where you are. You will love the food. You will love Leela, and you will laugh, and you'll be turning those pages. Angela.
Just everything about it is super relatable. You just want to be her best friend, and you want to be her best friend's best friend too at the same time.
Yes.
And I mean, the highlight is the food descriptions are amazing. I think maybe like a week after I read it, I made one of the dishes that was in the book because it sounded so good. And it probably wasn't as delicious as Leela would have been able to make it, or her aunts. But yeah, it's everything about it is just so great. It has like the heart, it has the humor, the mystery, yeah, everything just all rolled up into one great book.
Pre-order. All right. And then Mia, I'm going to have you give the last word. If you want to just share a little bit of final encouragement to anybody who's about to start editing or revising or querying, if they're in kind of that early stage, they need a little advice or some pep talk.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, the work is never done. Like, perfect is the enemy of done, right? I'm going to be very cliche right now. Perfect is the enemy of done. You always want to go forward with the best that you can make it, but there's a certain point where you're just making it different, not better. So you need to revise to the point where you feel, hopefully you've had like critique partners or beta readers or something like that, until the part you feel good. And then you need maybe some professional eyes on it to help you get ready for revising. Because, I revised Arsenic and Adobo a million times before I queried. And then I revised it again with my agent. And then I did 3 rounds of content edits with Angela and Michelle, and then copy it, so don't think that you're like, oh, that's it, right? But also don't think it has to be this beautiful, perfect, they're going to print it tomorrow story. Right? There's a beautiful middle ground there. And so like, just don't give up. Again, my first book failed, right? After over a year and a half, just kept writing, right? Kellye's book took 6 years, and she is like the best.
Yep.
Legit the best. Won all the awards, an amazing person, an amazing writer, couldn't have happened to a better person. So just keep going.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I love it. Thank you. That was a wonderful discussion too. Thank you so much, Michelle, Angela, and Mia. And I'm going to hand it back over to Grant and just tell him thank you again, NaNoWriMo. You guys are just the best partners. It was wonderful. I had so much fun talking to everyone.
You're the best partner. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And everyone who showed up to share your wisdom, and all the attendees who were asking questions and chatting in the YouTube chat, that was just amazing. And I got to say, Mia, I think the thing I'm taking from this webcast is, earlier in the webcast, Mia said that there's always just one more step to the writing of the novel and the publishing of the novel, the submitting of the novel, everything. But what's so wonderful about that is that you guys presented a world that was so collaborative and supportive, and that's what we strive to be at NaNoWriMo. And I know that's what you strive for at Sisters in Crime. And I think this webcast was like perfect evidence of that. So, writing and publishing a book, certainly very hard, but you guys make it seem possible, and that's what we're all about, is trying to help people realize their creative potential. So many thanks for showing up for this webcast and sharing your wisdom. And I want to make sure that everyone remembers that Sisters in Crime has a special offer to join. You just have to put in the code NaNo21 by 2/1. This is my mnemonic device, NaNo21 by 2/1, which is February 1st. I've been spent the whole webcast thinking about this. So anyway, thanks to everyone again. And Siren's Song asked, she said this was so wonderful, she wants to return to it for all the information. And she asked if this is going to be available, the recording. And yes, so just return to this YouTube page. You can watch it again or share with friends. So yeah, we'll wish everybody a happy Friday. And I hope that everyone goes off and eats some of that scrumptious food that's in Mia's book.
Yes.
I want
And pre-order.
And pre-order, yeah.
Thank you so much, Grant. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.